Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our fifth family education night of the 2023-2024 school year. This is one session in a series of six. My name is Kristen Parson, and I am the IEP/IAP liaison for Northstar Career Center. I'd like to also introduce Holly Peel, who is the director of the Career Center. At the Career Center, we work with juniors, seniors, and young adults with disabilities to help them build career readiness skills they can use as they transition out of secondary education and enter the workforce. You can learn more about the different fields that we offer programming in on the Career Center tab of Northstar's main website, or you can reach out to us directly via email, and we will be sure to post that contact information into the chat shortly. We are also very happy to have two guest speakers with us this evening who have generously donated their time and expertise. Our first guest is Sarah Thompson. Sarah is the Life Skills and Transition Program Manager with Commonwealth Autism. She's going to discuss some of the skills needed to live independently and give us an overview of the programming that Commonwealth Autism offers for young adults who want to learn and use those skills. Our second speaker is Kelsey Calder from GRTC. Kelsey is a nationally certified travel training instructor who specializes in providing travel training for seniors and people with disabilities. Through her work, she makes public transportation and resources around the Richmond area more accessible. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and the rest of us are going to turn off our cameras. Please remember that you are welcome to chat any questions or comments that you have, and there will also be an opportunity to ask more personal questions at the end of tonight's presentations.
Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Thompson, as Kristen said, and she gave you my role and what I do. Tonight, I am presenting on launching into adulthood, self-advocates and families in transition. Again, I am the Life Skills and Transition Manager at Commonwealth Autism. My experience is an array of supporting neurodivergent adults and adolescents, and also co-occurring mental health conditions. I also have a significant experience in trauma-informed therapeutic approaches, and I've mostly supported transition age youth and adults throughout my time at Commonwealth Autism. I'm also certified in Elevatus Sexuality and Relationships Training, where I provide sex ed and sexuality training to service providers, self-advocates, and to families. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Objectives of this presentation. We're going to review the key joys and fears for families and self-advocates during the transition stage of adolescence into adulthood. Understanding and applying stages of psychosocial development, systems theory concepts, and family systems theory concepts. Approaches and resources in transition. And that's it. So we're first going to talk about key joys and fears for families during transition. We've pulled up a couple studies here, making sure I have all that up there. So a 2019 qualitative longitudinal study about transition experiences noted that transition for families was a gradual and long-term experience. This was not something that happened like we're used to, where your young adult child is in high school for 4 years. You know, transition doesn't happen in a blink of an eye. It happens over a span of time. Families noted concerns about getting the needed services for their young adults, feeling concerns with mental health barriers, reflection, having reflected on their adults having come a long way since their childhood, accepting that their child is who they are and loving them for that. And also the study highlighted that their parents noted that there was a challenge of getting the balance right. So I take a quote from the study. It's a very fine line. We can't make him do things. He's an adult, but it's also not okay to just sit at home all day playing on a PlayStation. That's not part of being in the adult world. So I'm sure many of you parents who are here tonight can relate to those key joys and fears. Highlighting a bit more, a 2018 literature review noted that families feel a responsibility to educate their support professionals about autism and other disabilities, feeling like support providers in transition may not understand where their youth or teen is at in the process, and reported really having difficulty navigating their role in their children's transition. And I say children loosely, we're talking children, adults. It's hard to understand as a parent, you're a nurturer, you're a provider, and for your adult who may have a developmental disability also may have a hard time with you then becoming a coach who's helping them in this process and saying, okay, well, I'm not going to do for you anymore now. I'm doing with you to help you learn, or I want you to start doing your laundry. And for a lot of teens, that's really hard to hear, and a lot of young adults. A 2015 study of parental quality of life. Parents of transition age youth and young adults with disabilities were generally satisfied with their family quality of life and looking back at the whole span. So that's providing a little bit of hope and joy in the process, that this feels really, really big as you're looking towards transition. Will my adult ever live on their own? Will my kid ever be able to do these things? Will we feel satisfied? Will we struggle this whole experience? No, I think overall, a lot of families feel satisfied with that experience. So we have a lot of parent support groups in what we do, and we work with a lot of community partners like Courage to Succeed and here in Richmond, Virginia, and Autism Society of Central Virginia, and transition topics come up. And so what we hear in those processes and talking to families is that parents report the joy of seeing their kid being successful at things they never anticipated, hitting milestones that they were not sure would be possible. For example, riding the bus. Some parents are like, my adult will never be able to do that. And they do it. Or getting a license, cooking on their own, getting that first job. What is going to happen to my kid after I'm gone? Are some fears that come up for families. Of course, that's the big question. You think, well, I guess Johnny will just live with me and forever. I'm going to support Johnny. I've always supported him. But Johnny's going to outlive you. Your child is going to outlive you. So how do we equip our adult child with the skills they need to be happy and successful, and especially to be able to navigate life when we're no longer here? Fears that if I'm not there with them present, my child will experience social rejection or other difficulties. And can I handle that? It's that same feeling of sending your child off to kindergarten or to daycare for the first time. It's scary. Fears of letting my child fail, fear of regression and setbacks and slippery slopes. Of course, we all have had those experiences, especially those with kids in school too, with developmental disabilities, and having big moments of regression and that being so hard on your child's self-esteem and your family's morale altogether. And so there can be a lot of fear and PTSD around these regressive moments and setbacks, and the fear that, oh no, if we regress, this is a slippery slope. And so I think a lot of parents share that. And then also, finding safe ways to stretch. How can we ever find a good way to test if Susie can drive? How will that ever feel safe? So I'm sure you guys can relate to a lot of these joys and fears. So then we talk about disabilities impact, right? And so many of you have young adults with a disability or a loved one. And so we look at, there's delays in moving through developmental stages for many individuals. Many of the adults I work with, so again, I support adults in transitioning from launching from their family home into an apartment or home of their own, maybe launching to college, maybe just going to Wilson workforce. We help adults prepare for those big steps. And I have to say, a lot of the bulk of the clients we serve who are successfully launching are in their mid-20s. And so keeping in mind that where we are sometimes developmentally, is going to happen a little bit later. It isn't that traditional 18 to 21 classic, you leave the house, you go to college, then you live on your own. It's going to look different for our launching youth who have a developmental disability. And then identity influenced by disability. Some individuals are self-advocates for themselves and feel comfortable, and I'm going to speak to autism because we are Commonwealth Autism, and feel confident to use identity first language. I'm autistic, I have autism, and these are my needs, and I'm going to advocate for myself. Some adults don't feel comfortable. Some maybe got a diagnosis later in life for a disability and aren't there yet with acceptance. And then there's too much independence. So there can be too much isolation. Some individuals enjoy socialization and some enjoy spending a lot of time on their own, and that can impact progress. And then display aspects from multiple stages and ages. So being mature in some areas and not in others. I can't even, tell you how many of my clients who, wow, you can drive out of the state confidently and safely drive, but we also can't use the stovetop confidently. And I don't know if we'll ever get there. So a lot of disabilities impact some areas more than others without a rhyme or reason. So that has an impact on that launch, that ready to launch aspect. So how do family structure and culture play a role? So, keeping in mind that familial support has a strong impact on security for individuals in their adult lives. So there was a study here, Sosnowi et al. 2018 talked about parents feeling more confident when there was a family system around their young adult with a disability. Siblings being involved. Did not want to put undue pressure on siblings, though, at the same time to be those full-time caregivers. Some of you may have a sibling to your disabled young adult who is engaged and wanting to be a support, and some of you may not. Parents may be on a spectrum of being ready for those next steps. So I've worked with parents who are totally ready for their adult to launch at 18, 20, feeling ready to support in that. And some parents not at all feeling ready at all and feeling more comfortable closer to 30. And of course, number of children and birth order. We talk about Adlerian psychology. That all has an impact on where parents are at and being ready for their young adult. So maybe your disabled child is the firstborn, and this is all new and terrifying, but maybe your adult is one of your youngest, and you've done this many times before, and you feel more confident in being able to support in the process. So there's also a technology impact on launching and being able to navigate adulthood. this is a new addition to my presentation because there's been a lot of research and insight to this idea of the electronic umbilical cord. I think this is such a funny term, but it's so true. We have all these apps like, does anyone here maybe have like the Life 360 app or Find My iPhone or sharing location where you can see where your children are at all times, pacing in the room, outside, maybe wherever they're going off to. And so your young adult is aware of that connection. And so it's this feeling of, compared to when our generations and older were younger, where we didn't have that kind of supervision. So there was this feeling of autonomy in navigating our daily lives from an early age, even in high school, and being able to go off on our own and have the trust and the safely stretching in that way to be on our own. And now we're so connected to each other that we have this period of reluctant launchers, where individuals are not launching as early because of these impacts. And also, yeah, I think I covered that. So we're going to shift over to some system theory concepts that may be helpful in understanding as a family, as you start to approach adulthood and as you're navigating even high school age, middle school, and starting to lean on outsourcing supports to get support to help build skills, whether that is behavioral supports, maybe it's academic supports, maybe someone's coming in your home, maybe you're outsourcing where you're getting therapeutic help. And I'll talk more about why outsourcing supports is so important in this process. But I'd like you to think about, and this is if you're from a service provider's perspective, but your family is a system. I like to think of it as this mobile, this children's mobile, hanging over a crib, right? And so there's this sense of homeostasis, your solar system of sorts. And when you add something onto that, and you are all pieces in it, mom, dad, brother, sister, and your adult, and your adult who has the disability specifically. And so you add in a support, and that mobile is going to kind of topple and have it will impact it. There will be some uncomfortable dysregulation, but you can't really have change without having that healthy stress. And eventually that mobile stabilizes. And so the idea is that the systems theory is that as you put a new input, there's going to be this level of stress that is going to lead to growth and change. And so that is something that is important to keep in mind in the transition process. It's also Bowen's family system theory. And this is another theory that can be drawn upon to normalize your own experience. This theory is the idea that the nature of a family and its members are intensely emotionally connected. When an intense emotional connection exists for both the parent and the young person, a lot of times enmeshment and codependency can occur. And a lot of times the less developed person's self is the more impact the others have on this person's functioning. And the more that they're controlled actively or passively through the function of others, this leads to this person's sense of self being wrapped up in their parents. So if you can think about in a young adult, especially a developing teen and a parent, their personality and self can be wrapped up in their parents when there's this sense of enmeshment and deep connection. It can be challenging for some family systems to separate this enmeshment and allow their adults to go and do. And so it's important to keep this in mind, and especially in family projection process. And I usually use this great video from the movie Lady Bird, where the idea is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the parent is stressed about their adult not making it in adulthood, and in those ways that they're stretching and learning and trying to go out and risk and do things on their own. And that anxiety is felt by the young adult, and that adult then internalizes that. And then they are then unable to be successful. So it's really important to think about these things as you and your family are approaching adulthood, and how you engage with your young adult. So the idea of moving towards adulthood is this incremental shift towards interdependence. We are never truly independent. We are always relying on the resources around us. Think of yourselves, adults here in this presentation. You all have resources around you, whether it is your spouses or your parents or your children themselves or your therapists, your physicians, your personal trainers. We all have this network of supports, and we're strategically learning how to utilize those individuals. So when I talk about launching into independence, I don't even like to use that word independence, because I feel like young adults feel really fearful of that big, scary word. And so it's the idea of shifting this concept for them, where it's, again, becoming less dependent on mom and dad, and learning the skills to feel confident. And we'll talk more about that. There's also an importance of understanding the trauma perspective of working with or supporting your young adult with a developmental disability such as autism. I like to use autism as an example, but I also know that many other developmental disabilities share share the underlying factor of it being frankly traumatic, to go through life with a disability. I mean, going through life in general is anxiety provoking, especially with everything that we are exposed to in the world these days. But if you think about individuals with high sensory needs, with who are masking all day, who are trying to fit in socially in a inclusive setting, who are trying to constantly learn things and navigate in this world with neurotypical standards and rules. So there's this sense of understanding this impact of exposure to long-term exposure to trauma that will impact our mental health as we approach this huge transition in life. I love this slide. It's also important, the expression seeing the forest for the trees, it's important to see the forest. As you approach adulthood, and you all may be thinking, maybe some of you have teens, maybe you have like a 13 to 15-year-old here. Maybe many of you are in high school and you have a 16 to 18-year-old. Maybe some of you have early 20s. And you're thinking, oh man, I can't even get her to clean her room or to do this or that. Oh, the hygiene piece is so bad. They're never going to be able to live on their own. And I urge you to take a step back and think about the huge progress your youth has made in over the last few years, and notice that as you zoom out, that that will happen in continuation through this big transition phase. And progress is not always linear. We support adults from 8, we have 18-year-old clients to adults in their 40s. And I have to share that progress is not always linear for our clients who have autism and other co-occurring um, conditions, but also for neurotypical individuals. Think about how many people you know in your life, or think to yourself, I definitely launched from my family home and I moved back because I had to go to school or there was some sort of factor for a period of time. And so many of our clients do have to move back home for periods of time, and we try again because we've learned something. Or maybe we had to resituate and rethink a career choice, or a location of living, or the supports that were in place at the time, or maybe we weren't in the right mental health space, and take that as a learning opportunity and move forward, because progress is not always linear, but always, again, seeing the forest. So I think it's also important, as you all start preparing for launch in this period of time in your life, is that kind of ignore these apps for a second, because I want to first get on my soapbox about outsourcing. So I think it's so important, and I want to go back to those family systems theory concepts, is that, you cannot do everything for your adult. You cannot be mom and dad or auntie, whatever supportive party, and be coach, mentor. It is so crucial that you lean on the supports in your life. Outsource. There are opportunities and people and services in the state of Virginia, or if you're outside of Virginia, there for you and your family and your transition age youth, to help you in this process. I will tell you that I've seen a lot of parents fight this fight, and when you lean on outside supports with your added support, of course, and it allows your adult to lean away from you and have more autonomy in themselves, and kind of judiciously using those supports. And technology is a beautiful thing. I should not be prompting anyone. I work with my clients of self-prompting, whether it's reminders in their phones. I need to take a shower at this time because, and this alarm should go off. Maybe alarm needs to go off 3 times to shower because I am so sick of mom telling me and prompting me 5 times. There are many awesome apps that are so self-rewarding. There's one called Habitica. There's one called Timo. There's so many great self-monitoring apps, habit-forming apps to help your adult enjoy, I get points if I go exercise, or I, check my bank account on the app, or I check in with mom and dad every day when I get home from school. So again, relying less on the relationship and the prompting and that codependence and enmeshment, and leaning away from that and outsourcing supports at an early age. Start now. And it's never too late for this. I work with 20s and 30s, and we're introducing a lot of this, and it's just never too late. And again, that concept of taking the training wheels off. And having transparency with yourself. I created this tripartite responsibilities chart, and I've asked parents, I'm like, so what do you do for your adult? What does your adult do for themselves? Or I'll ask the adult, what do you do for yourself? What do your parents do for you? And off the bat, you're like, oh, she does a lot of things for themselves. They do a great job. And then when we sit down and do a chart like this, where you're kind of checking off, okay, laundry, who does it? Hygiene, who does it? Cooking. You're really able to see how the responsibilities stack up. And you're like, okay, it gives you a lot of self-awareness and transparency into maybe really who's doing the most work, and maybe does this need to shift more toward the adult and less towards the parent, or both. This is a nod to this event. So, resource sharing is huge for families. And, a study here we quoted, it's great to learn from professionals, yes. So you're hearing from me and from Kelsey with GRTC. But, parents also suggested wanting to learn from each other. So I encourage you all to look into those parent support groups. We offer them, attend them. If you sign up, go to them. It feels really good to talk to other parents and to hear about their experiences. It may be encouraging for you in the way of, wow, like it's good to hear your adult is now there, or wow, my situation isn't that bad. Sometimes it's good to hear that. So yeah. Again, that family to family communication, support groups, social groups, community groups, advocacy groups, is really helpful. So a little bit about Commonwealth autism. I'm going to shift here. Thank you for the learning portion of my presentation. So our adult programming, we envision a future where all individuals have the opportunity to pursue their ideal living situation. And so we support that independent living skills development through direct teaching, modeling, shared problem solving. We harness both intrinsic motivation and natural community supports to help individuals build sustainable solutions. We're committed to developing honest and trusting relationships, building community partnerships, and using evidence-based interventions to support adults and families. Here is a little flyer for our programming. So I oversee our life skills and transition program. We have two programs within our adult program. I'm going to talk about both. Our life skills and transition program, our kind of bread and butter portion of it is that we connect a young adult with a coach. The coach works with a young adult or transition age youth weekly to work on independent living skills. First, we start with an assessment period to hone in on strengths and lagging skills to build that learning profile and development plan. We then start setting short-term goals to reach those long-term goals. Maybe we're in our last year of high school and we want to go to college, or we are trying to get that first job and move out. And so the adults we work need to have the motivation to want to navigate adulthood and be ready maturity-wise for that, developmentally for that. And we also provide educational opportunities. Again, I mentioned sexuality and relationships education. We also host social groups. We recently just had a meetup at Barnes and Noble. We've done walking groups here, as you can see in this photo, and so much more. We'll partner up with other local service providers who share a similar client base, and we'll have meetups with them to help have our adults socialize with people outside of our programming, which is super important. So another portion of our programming is our career readiness and education program. I don't know if many of you are from the Richmond area, but we just purchased Good Foods Grocery in Stony Point in Richmond, Virginia, and that's right over the south side of the river. And we've started a career readiness program where young adults will have the opportunity to sit in I think it's a 6-week course, and then they'll be a part of a paid internship, and then we'll be connected with a job coach into a job that they may want to be. So this is kind of complementary to Northstar's program and many more out there. So yeah, that's our adult programming. Again, here is a highlight of our offerings. Again, social groups, parent support, education, community engagement, skill maintenance, information and resources, sexuality education, and more. Here's some fun pictures of us doing what we do. And I like to end on this note. These are two great quotes. Everyone is interdependent. Grown-ups, it's not like we're completely independent, like we never ask anyone for advice or help. And in the long run, it is the judicious use of that dependence and that gradual transfer to other support systems that results in greater success in independent functioning. All right, I have 8 minutes for questions. If anyone has any. And also, here's my email. If you have individual questions and you would like to set up a time to meet with me, you're welcome to reach out. We also have on commonwealthautism.org, you can look at our adult programming page and we have an inquiry form you can fill out and you can set up a call with myself or Sarah McCaig, who oversees our career program. And we would be more than happy to schedule time with you. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for monitoring the time. Always appreciate it. Your presentation was awesome. I especially appreciated how you emphasized kind of the universality of the experience, right? That it's not just an experience of parents with children with disabilities, but it's just kind of a parent experience, really. And then, of course, that just adds another layer to it. But whether you're experiencing those fears of knowing how to protect your child as they move into adulthood, or you have those kind of, like you mentioned, this technology and the different things that you have in your family dynamic, those are very universal things that everyone kind of works through. So I think that that's a good takeaway for sure.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. I don't see any in the chat, but just as a reminder to participants, if you do have any questions for Sarah, you're welcome to chat them. And then she's got her contact information up here as well. The first question I had was, do you have to have a diagnosis or identify as an individual with autism to participate in Commonwealth Autism's programming?
No, we don't require any formal diagnosis. We do typically work with autistic adults, adolescents and adults. However, we find that there's a lot of parallels in developmental disabilities, and we work with just neurodivergent adults in general.
Okay, great. And is there an age limit for the adults that you work with?
No, for example, in Sarah McCaig's career readiness class, she has a 15-year-old and a 33-year-old in the same cohort, and that's great. It's a willingness and motivation to be in that space. We've worked with 18-year-olds who are totally ready in there, and then late 20-year-olds who struggle with the motivation. So it is just where you're at in a headspace. And I think that's a great question, because I think for me, it's finding the sweet spot. A lot of times we engage our children our adult children, when we feel we're ready, or when we have those like age figures in our heads, like, oh, 18. But keeping in mind that often pushing your adult to transition before they're ready can lead to those regressions and can hurt that confidence and motivation. So it's important to set up a call with us. We can meet your young adult virtually or in person, and we can help kind of field some of
That's a
those
good fit.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes
Billy G just asked, how does the Commonwealth Autism job readiness effort work in relation to DARS and pre-eds? Billy G, you can definitely reach out to me in my email if you'd like, and we can set up a call when the recording ends so that we can have individual questions. That's a great question. So back to the question is working with DARS. So the career readiness and employment program is just starting out. And we are working to become a DARS vendor and going through that process. That's fully the plan. And so Yeah, I am actually, I'm leaving after my presentation, so I won't be present, but please reach out to me. I am more than happy to set up a time, or I can point you to Sarah McCaig, and her email is sarah.mccaig, McCaig at commonwealthautism.org. And I can type that in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. The only other question that I had was you had mentioned that you guys have the social groups that you do. Is that only for people who are actively participating in like the weekly job coaching, or is that just kind of open to the public?
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll post them on Eventbrite. For example, we do have a location in Virginia Beach. Sorry, I didn't mention that. We are in Richmond and Virginia Beach physically, and we support adults around the state. But we will support your adult in person in Richmond and Virginia Beach. So we're actually located in the FACT building in Virginia Beach, and we have an upcoming board game night that's posted. And so if you just keep
Awesome.
pulse on our Eventbrite page, we post things periodically. As the weather warms up, we do a walking meetup almost monthly, and we enjoy that. So it's a good opportunity for exercise, wellness, and socialization.
And are those interactions kind of facilitated by staff members, or is it?
Yeah, we do have a staff present,
Okay.
but the idea is that the adult would attend individually, it would be a drop off, or they would get there on their own, is what
Okay.
we'd encourage, and that they would be engaging on their own. Yeah, so
Exciting. That's awesome. All right, great. Thank you so much.
yeah, no,
I don't see any other questions in the
sure.
chat, so I think we are good to go on that front. But again, if you are participating and you have any follow-up questions, Sarah has included her email here. You'll also get a copy of her presentation that includes that contact information after tonight's event. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us this evening. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. Really quick, sorry, just to add on, I'm
Sure.
going to put a link to our screening form in the chat. So if anyone wants to go ahead and fill that out, that's a helpful way for us to learn a little bit about you and connect you for potentially for our services, or just to help you navigate this period in your adult's life. So thanks, y'all.
That's great.
Nice to chat with you all tonight, and have a good
Thank
one.
you again.
Bye.
All right, so what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and switch gears over to Kelsey, who will be speaking with us from GRTC. And again, she is the travel trainer, so she's going to be walking through what that process looks like.
All right, thanks so much, Kristen. Let me start sharing my screen. All right. All right, so I am GRTC's travel training instructor. I have been with the program since the inception of it, so it's been over 8 years now. And I was a previous special education teacher in Virginia, and I was licensed for 10 years. And I am the first nationally certified travel trainer via Easter Seals and the University of South Florida's Center for Urban and Transportation Research. Since the program has started, since 2015, I've trained over 260 individuals in small groups. So I'm very busy. I'm out in the public, on a bus, walking the sidewalks, or walking, the area of Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield, where the buses go. And so I'm going to give you a little overview about what travel training is, and then kind of what GRTC provides in way of transportation. Because maybe you don't want to do travel training, you don't want to learn how to use the city bus for your child, but maybe there are some other options that GRTC has that you would like to use. So our types of transit service are fixed route. So that's going to be our regular city buses, like the big buses that you see. They drive a specific route. They have a schedule. Our buses are numbered. So you might see like a 19, an 18. You might see a number and a letter. So a 7A, a 1A. Right now, all of our, most of our services are free. And but when we did take ask for fares, the regular city buses was only, 75 cents or, $1.75 per trip. So it is very cheap. Right now it's free, but if we ever went back to taking money, it again is a very cheap option for transportation. You might have also seen our bus rapid transit line, which is what we call the Pulse. It is blue and green, and it goes up and down Broad Street and Main Street. And it kind of mimics like a metro or a subway where it has stations. They're going to be brick and mortar with a shelter. And those, the bus stops at every one of those stations. So you don't have to pull a cord or anything. We also have express buses. Those are kind of few and far between right now. COVID kind of made the express buses almost non-existent. So we do have a few. We have one that goes to Petersburg, Richmond to Petersburg. We have one out in Chesterfield, the Commonwealth 20 movie theater, that location that goes from there to Richmond City. And then we have one out in Henrico County, the Gaskins Park and Ride. And this is something new, microtransit, to what are some of our services. So I do not know at all about microtransit, but right now we have a hub and we call it the Azalea Zone. And that is kind of in north side of Richmond City. And then it goes along Meadow Bridge to the area of Mechanicsville and Hanover, where all of those kind of doctors' offices are. That is also free at the moment. And I'll kind of get into that more in a little bit. We also have paratransit. So this is curb to curb service. You have to be found eligible before you can use it. We call it the Caravan. It is a shared ride service. And for the shared ride, so you would make your reservation at least a day in advance. They would give you a pickup window, and then you would also schedule a ride home. We also have care on demand. This is like your Uber or your Lyft, where if you are eligible for use of the Caravan, you have access to care on demand. So that's same day, same ride. This costs money still. So it's a minimum of $6 per ride, and can be, anything. It's still like Uber, Lyft with price surging, and all of those variables that might make it more expensive. So our areas, this is just kind of a little bit of where we go. These are not all of our routes, but we go all the way out to Sheltering Arms, right over the Goochland border. That Azalea Avenue, that area, that's where our buses kind of stop. And I think that's where our microtransit picks up and does that area. We go all the way out to the airport, and we go all the way down in Southside to Bright Point Community College. And then kind of now we go all the way over to the Chesterfield Town Center, and the Sam's Club and the Walmart over down Midlothian. That is a pilot program. So hopefully Chesterfield County residents use it, and we will be able to continue that service. This is what one of our bus stop signs looks like. So it is a pole. It has a circle on top with a bus. That little snowflake means that bus stop would be serviced if we ever go on snow routes. As of late, we haven't had much snow, so we haven't had to do that. But so in event of, I think the last time was maybe 2018, 2019, where we had to do snow routes. But that usually means just if buses go through neighborhoods, those stops might not be accessible. And then other things to note on these flags, the stop number. That stop number is a specific ID that is unique to that bus stop pole. So if you were to call customer service, which is the phone number below, and you were to say, hey, where's my bus? What time is it coming? And you have no idea where you are in the world, but you can say I'm at stop 3774. That customer service representative would be able to tell you exactly when the next bus is coming. And then at the bottom where you see the 19, it says 19 Daily West Broad Street. So that is the bus route, 19. Its name is West Broad Street and daily. So it comes daily. So not all of our buses are every day. Some of our buses are Monday through Friday. And then some of our buses are just Monday through Saturday. So this is what our typical bus looks like. As you can see that it there are no stairs on the bus. So back within the past 8 years, because when I did start, we did have stairs on the bus. All of our buses have converted over to this. They're called low floor buses. They can even get lower when they come to a stop. That front door has a ramp that pops out that can, for a mobility device or someone else who cannot hop up onto that step. And then on the front is where you can put a bicycle. So all of our buses are equipped with that front bicycle rack. We have 2 spots on our purple and silver buses, and then on our Pulse buses, we have 3 spots for bikes. So inside our buses, all of our buses look the same, even though I've kind of said there's some differentiation between the Pulse buses and then the other buses. All the buses on the inside are the same. And then on the right, that picture, that's our new signage. So you can see the green 78 is the bus stop or the bus route that you are on. And then that Colorado and Eggleston, that's the bus stop coming up. That's the one the bus driver is about to pass. And then it shows you the stops that are coming up after that. So it's a good way to kind of plan and get to know your surroundings if you're, if you don't know what you're looking for. This is what one of our Pulse stations looks like. This is the one that, yes, some of them are in the middle of the road, and they can seem dangerous, but I promise you they are not. They are all connected to a crosswalk and with a light. So that means they have a signal. That means the bus is stopped and the cars are stopped when people are crossing. And so as you can see here, the other one was called Arts District. This one's called Science Museum. And they are labeled east and west by which direction the bus is going. The only difference between these pictures now is that the bus only lane has been painted red. So another just kind of visual, so cars don't get near the stations. So kind of what I do when I'm planning for a bus trip with someone is I always just start with Google Maps, which is, something that everyone has access to either via a desktop or their phone. And usually when I'm working with people, they've already maybe have used Google Maps before, or their parents have, or if they used to drive and now they don't. So it's kind of just a good starting off point. Apple Maps as well works too. But so when you start, that button at the top, it usually pre-populates to car directions, but that train icon, that actually just means transit, and that ties directly into GRTC's bus schedules. So I do not find that the paper bus schedules are very user-friendly. So this kind of just takes away, you don't have to learn how to read a bus schedule. This kind of takes away that. So I still have up picture or directions from the old Northstar Academy building since y'all have moved, a couple years ago. But at the time, Northstar Career Academy was accessible by one of our buses. It was the bus number 18, as you can see below that little square. And that bus came every hour. And so this was just an option. And you can also, when you see it, you can look over and kind of see the bus route of where you're going. So to kind of just expand your options, how it says 1:04 p.m., 2:04, that's how you know the bus is coming every hour without having to look at one of those paper schedules. You can always change when you depart, when you arrive, what day you're traveling. And this is kind of, I know it looks daunting, but this is kind of like a good place just to start and play around with, just to even see if where you live is on a bus line or where you want to go is on a bus line, because Google will not let you walk over, more than a mile. So if one of your addresses is over a mile away from a bus stop, it will say it cannot get there. So some of our apps, we do have a GRTC app. It is free. It does do real-time arrival of the buses. You can track the buses and you can kind of plan your route that way. The route tracker on our GRTC app is just Google Maps without all of the buttons that Google Maps has. So that's why I like to start with Google Maps. But then when I go to my bus stop and I'm waiting there, I will pull up our GRTC app to kind of see where my bus is in real time. So I did kind of touch on the microtransit. It's called Link. And like I said, it's just in the Azalea zone right now, which is the, kind of Henrico High School, Mechanicsville area. This app or one of the phone numbers for the Link service needs to be used to request a ride. I'm not completely familiar with it. We started it less than a month ago, but you have to be in the area and you have to go to an address in the area. So it does not take you outside the area and it does not pick you up outside the area. And I do believe that we do have a map on our website if you're more interested in that. Then we do also we've also put to the premium version of Transit. So Transit's an app that's in many cities. And so GRTC has kind of bought the premium service for Transit. So it makes it easier to use for us as consumers. So again, you still get the current arrival time. You kind of see where your bus is on your route. You can plan your route between Transit and the GRTC app. It's kind of just user preference. I'm kind of a little stick in the mud, and so I still like the GRTC app, but I'm getting more familiar with Transit and can teach people how to use either one. So what exactly is travel training? What exactly do I do? So it is free, and it's for anyone 15 years and older. It can be one-on-one training. It can be personal mobility device training, and it can be bus orientation. So one-on-one training is what I do the most of. And it starts with an in-person meeting, usually at the person's home. Caregivers, case managers welcome. Any interested parties are welcome. There's a series of questions that I ask and a liability waiver that I need before we actually get on the bus together. And then during that meeting, depending on what the training needs, determines what we do next. So whether it's just learning how to walk to the nearest bus stop, learning how to use the app, learning how to use Google Maps, actually taking a trip on a bus, learning how to plan trips, or all of the above. It can be everything. And then there's no time frame. So we work together until the training has mastered the skills to safely and independently travel. They will be open conversations after every bus trip. I tell everyone that I work with that I'm going to plan a route that I believe is the best for them, but they also need to contribute as well. And if they're not going to do this, if they hate crossing at a certain street, but they'd cross maybe at a street later or before, anything like that, we can always change it up. And it does not hurt my feelings if they don't like the route. I didn't make the bus routes. I'm just trying to help people get the most out of our bus routes. But yeah, so we can work together multiple times too. So let's say we do learn how to get from your home to school, but now you want to learn how to get from your house to your friend's house. We can also learn how to do that. There's no need to pick and choose. You don't have to just do doctors. You don't have to do school. You don't have to do employment. We can do fun things as well. And I've had people who, I taught them how to get to work. I taught them how to get to all their locations. And then all of a sudden they switch jobs. So I might not have heard from them in a couple of years, and they'll call me and say, hey, I switched jobs. Can you help me learn the bus route there? So, we can do it all. So personal mobility device training is only for people who are eligible for our caravan service. So what they would do is they would schedule a time to come to the GRTC building and actually go onto our bus yard, and they can practice getting on and off all of our buses that they might see on their trip with, without the stress of an audience of people actually on the bus, waiting for them to use maybe their wheelchair or their scooter. And then the caravan would take them home afterwards. In the past, we used this a lot because we had more buses that were different. The fronts, some were smaller than others. Since we've kind of reorganized our fleet of buses, they're all pretty typically the same. Actually, if they're not all the same. So not everyone. So I haven't had many people do this, but we can definitely do this if that is something that people need. And then bus orientation. So this kind of just depends on where, where the training needs to go. Usually, this might just be someone who's more familiar with bus training. Maybe they lived in Northern Virginia and now they live in Richmond, and they just kind of need to, get their feet wet, and then they can kind of just go off from there. This might also be for groups, or maybe like a group home might just take a bus trip just to kind of get their feet wet and see if this is something they want to learn. So 1 or 2 meetings for bus orientation. But, if you guys don't want to actually start yet, you kind of just want to build those skills right now, as you still, have children in high school. You can always practice pedestrian street skills, crosswalks, using pedestrian signals, crossing without a stoplight, crossing with only a stoplight, what to do if there's construction on your sidewalk, identifying GRTC's vehicles. We do have the Caravan, our purple and silver buses, and our blue and green buses. And then also now we have our Link buses. The Link buses kind of look like our Caravan buses, just with a different logo. They can identify our GRTC drivers by our uniform. All of our drivers have specific attire that they need to wear. So something with a GRTC logo, purple, or a blue colored shirt. You could start practicing using the map app to plan trips, use the walking feature to plan a route around your neighborhood, or see if you could walk a bus route. You can also, we do have some how to ride guide videos on our YouTube. These are not the most up to date, since we don't have to pay a fare and things have changed, in the past couple of years, but they still are, great source of information, especially if you've never been on a bus before. You can always do math to figure out how much money you'd save by taking public transit, dressing for the weather. And then sometimes people just like to follow a bus in a car, in their neighborhood, if they know that the bus is there, and kind of see just where it goes and see, how it stops, if it stops, how many riders get on and off. And then, so I kind of wanted to touch on the Caravan as well, because that might be something more suitable for your student. And so on our website, if you go under services, you can go to specialized transportation and you go to care, and then you go to eligibility. So eligibility is through a company called ADA Ride, and that is because GRTC does not keep any doctors or nurses on staff. So ADA Ride does. So anything in the doctor portion of the application packet is, kept private. And then the only thing sent over to GRTC is what we, the pertinent information we need to know. And then, so if you're found eligible for the Caravan, there is access to Care on Demand. And then, okay. So if you go to the Care on Demand page here, which is just under the Care section, it will have the most up-to-date information. Right now, we only have one company that we're using for Care on Demand, but we should be having another company come on board. I don't know when, but so just if you go to that website, it will have the most up-to-date information on who to call, or if there's an app that you can use. And then, so for me, if you ever need me and you forget all of this information, you can also go to our website, and the travel training program button is right underneath specialized transportation, and you can find my information there. But yeah, so does anyone have any questions? Kind of went through that pretty quickly, but.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Just
Okay.
but I did have a couple questions for when you had the Care on Demand, because that's newer to GRTC, right? Screen pulled up from the website, it said to schedule up to 2 hours in advance. Is there a limit as to, like, if someone had their work schedule, for example, is there a limit to how far in advance they can schedule rides?
So that's going to be company dependent.
Okay.
So right now it's Userve, and Userve, I believe you can schedule 30 days out.
That's great.
So, and then the 2 hour window is more for people who have a mobility device or something that can't fit into a standard car because they can't just send a car. They have to send maybe a van or something else. So
Okay.
that's that 2 hour window.
Would that be
I've
the
worked,
same thing if they had like a service animal as well?
yes,
Okay.
yes. That shouldn't, I say that shouldn't matter, but yeah, just as a precaution. A gentleman I worked with for learning how to do the care on demand, he called it through an app and it was there within 30 minutes. So kind of just like Uber or Lyft.
Okay. And that's serving the same area that the bus routes would serve, generally speaking.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So it does. So the caravan service area is all of Henrico County, even though the buses don't go all over Henrico County, and little parts of Chesterfield where our buses go, and then of course all of Richmond City because that's where the buses go. And so then the care on demand section is the same, except for the Bright Point Community College location. It does stop, I believe, at Chippenham meets Route 1.
Right.
Like there's a food line right there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Great.
But that does change. I don't want to say that changes frequently, but we have, once different companies come on board, as long as it's within our bus service area, our city bus service area,
Mhm.
the caravan goes there, and then some companies for care on demand might actually include those areas. So I would just ask before.
Okay, that makes sense. Especially if you continue to expand and add,
Yes.
like you said, add more programs.
Yes.
Now, the only other question that I had, and then Holly's got a question for us too in the chat. How long does it usually take? Like if someone wants to do one-on-one training with you, is there a wait period to get in on your schedule, or like how far in advance should they think for that kind of planning?
Unfortunately, it's just I do first come, first serve. So at the moment, if you were to say, I want to see you next week, I would tell you I'm busy. But, the week after, I've got dates available. And
Okay.
then, my March is looking very free at the moment. But it just can depend. I'm not as busy as I once was. COVID kind of, cut
Sure.
all of our services a little bit. But yeah, it's just first come, first serve. So what I do suggest is if you are thinking about, doing bus training to get to a job or to get to, pretty much anywhere,
Mhm.
just don't wait. So if you even might think like, I hope to get a job at Publix. Okay, let's learn that trip right now
Right.
before, tomorrow you say, I start my job at Publix. Can you help me? Oh,
Yeah.
might not be able to do that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Get those pieces in place ahead of time. And I think even just from a comfort standpoint, right? To
Mhm.
build that comfort level
Yeah.
with the route and how much time you need to allot.
Yes. And I will say that everyone I've helped who have come back, my repeat offenders, as I call them, they all, the training time is much less the second time, much less the third time, much less the fourth time. So getting over that hump of, oh, I have to pay attention, I have to pull a cord,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even just I have to, I'm looking on my phone, but I have to look this way, things like that. So once you kind of get over that initial hump and you're successful, it makes other trainings, just go a
Go
lot
a little
quicker.
easier. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So the question that Holly posted is, will you please speak to the ways that people use the service, even if they have a driver's license or a reliable family driver?
Yeah, yeah. So that's the cool thing about travel training, is that you don't, if you were to use my services and I get you independent on a certain route, that's great. If your dad picks you up every night, perfect. I love that for you. But that also works that if you don't have access to that driver, or let's say that car broke down, you know how to get to where you're going. You know what to do. You know the steps. It's not scary. You're not just, oh, now I have to pay for an Uber and the Uber's $35. And that kind of goes into a little bit with the caravan. So some people, will sign up for the caravan and they will never use it because I will teach them how to use the bus. But the caravan's in the back pocket just in case there is a time where, let's say they need to travel and that bus doesn't travel on Sundays, but they do. So kind of using all of the different pieces. So if you do have a driver's license, that's really great to be able to travel when you want to, and if you have a car. But me as a person, I take the bus because I don't want to have to pay for parking downtown. I don't want to have to, I'm getting out of a concert at 11 p.m. and I don't want to have to deal with traffic and people, and I just want to hop on the bus and I want to go home. So it's just adding to the layer of transportation that is already tough to do transportation, right, unless you are just a driver with a good, reliable car and you can pay for all of the gas and you can pay for the insurance. If you can't do that, GRTC is free. The caravan is free. So some people will come to me too and they will use, saying like, I can drive, but I want to do this. And so kind of filling in the transportation gap is what we can do.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point, that transportation gap, or even playing to the other anxieties that might exist, right, in certain circumstances. Like, for example, if you have a driver's license and you are comfortable driving, but you're only comfortable driving during the day, or you're only comfortable driving when the weather is bright and sunny, then having the GRTC training as an option for those times where you can't, or as you pointed out, the parking, maybe you're going to an area where it's a lot, more anxiety inducing to kind of navigate those pieces, and then having that as a backup plan is a great option.
Yeah, especially too for snow. I've worked for GRTC for 8 years and we actually stopped bus service for one day because of weather. So
that's impressive.
And before that, I think one of the planning department people told me it had been 20 years.
Wow.
So we rarely close. So that means we're always moving. And so if, you're ever stranded, that, we're there to pick you up and take you where you need to go.
That's great. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to stop the recording here. Remember to participants, if the slide deck and other resources from the presentations are going to be available on our Transition to Adulthood page. And for those of you who are joining us live, you are welcome to hang out after we stop the recording if you would like to ask Kelsey any other more personal questions. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you next month for our next family education night, which is focused on job searching and the report options that are available for that process.